Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
Welcome to Talking Head Pain, the podcast that confronts head pain head on. I'm Joe Coe, Director of Education and Digital Strategy at the Global Healthy Living Foundation, and I've lived with migraines for over 20 years. Throughout my journey, I've rarely seen migraine discussed on national TV, but today's guest brought migraine awareness to one of the biggest stages in the world, Jeopardy. Nicky Smith is a patient advocate and debate coach, and a recently featured contestant on Jeopardy.
For migraines, I've gone to witch doctors, I've done healers, I've done everything imaginable, grandmaster dondadoost. Like I cannot on any form of science or astrology or anything. I'm open to anything.
Who is Grandmaster Donadoost?
Grandmaster dondadoost. He's a guy that just like does readings and is like a master healer, and he'll give you his CD, and he's up in the hills in some mansion in the middle of nowhere, Bay Area, Marin, Napa area. And that was just very bizarre. And he's just, the witch doctor actually knew a lot about me that I don't think I told them. So that was actually interesting, but she wanted to kill a good amount of animals behind me. And I don't know if I would have really believed it. So a lot of people said I should have done it in retrospect, but she's still there probably. So who knows?
Well, I mean, we're kicking off Talking Head Pain, talking about animal sacrifice. This is a new area of exploration for us. So Thank you. I'm really excited to talk with you, Nicky. How are you feeling today, Nicky?
Dizzy. But beyond that, getting by. It's getting warmer. So not a fun migraine trigger, but in many ways, life is good. So I'm good.
Some of us may have seen you on Jeopardy, which is really exciting. How was that experience? Being on Jeopardy and using that platform to raise awareness?
Yeah, it was definitely intense. Imagine, the brightest light you can imagine right over your head, right in front of you, moving lights, moving cameras, all that. Pretty sure I blacked out through a good chunk of it. I don't remember a lot of it. So it's funny watching yourself later on TV and being like, oh, at least I got that answer right. Things like that. The interesting part is I had so many people, even in the migraine community, that work with migraine organizations, being like, you look so normal up there. You looked like there was nothing going on. And in my head, obviously rooms spinning, just sharp, like razor pick in the head and throughout the spine, super dizzy, super nauseous, super fatigued, but you can just look completely normal. And so I think just people to see that someone can, you're on live TV, you look like everything's under control, but in your brain is chaos. So that was interesting. But just, the best part about it was being able to talk about the condition, having so many people reach out and talk about how isolating it is, how they've never heard dizziness or, vertigo, or even how often do you even hear the word migraine on TV or in movies? I think other than Lucille Ball and Arrested Development, the word vertigo is never, other than that Hitchcock movie, which isn't really even about it. So just to be able to talk about a condition that's so prevalent, that affects so many in such a horrible way, and that's not mentioned at all, was great. Just to have so many folks be able to connect. And, I'm planning to start a support group in the Bay Area from this. I've been able to just share and connect with so many folks with resources from this. So that was the best part about it. But Jeopardy, was a whirlwind. I can, get more into that, but it was definitely a blur, to say the least.
That's so interesting. A couple of things. One, and I won't say what episode it was, but I recorded a whole podcast that I don't remember doing. I can see myself. I hear myself. I'm like, I was there. I did it. But I was during an attack. And, it's amazing, Nicky, what we can push through living with a chronic disease that we've lived with for so long. I definitely want to dive a little bit more into the experience about Jeopardy, but I created a little Jeopardy game for us to play, which is more on the gay side than the Jeopardy side. I'm going to call it Category Is. And if you could just answer with a sentence or a word, we can maybe dive into some of these questions a little bit more. But I thought it might be fun if you're willing to play Category Is with me.
Oh, yeah. I'll play anything. All the games.
Category Is the feeling you had during your worst migraine attack.
It's when I first had my major, vertigo migraine attack. 11 years ago now. I was in my office. I was starting my PhD program, and it just felt like someone picked my chair up, spun it around 1,000 times, and just kept smashing my head into the ground while they were spinning. It was like, like Thor or something picked up my chair and just whirled it around with such ferocity and anger and pain and chaos. And then I just remember calling the nurse hotline and being like, hey, I can't really see anything. I can't sit still or stand still. Everything hurts. My head keeps moving. My body keeps moving. It feels like they're going in different directions. I don't know what to do. You feel like you're dying. You're like, this is horrible. Why won't this stop? And they always go, come to the ER right away. You get to the ER and then they, but it's just, that was, the first attack was the scariest because I didn't know, I knew vertigo existed. I just thought, okay, the room spins, but it was just such a violent, chaotic, horrible, just the worst thing I could imagine that I wish upon no one. And then you learn that becomes your norm. As you said, you find a way to push through it. And that literally is my norm. But when it first hit, it was just horrendous. Yeah.
We'll do one more, and I guess this is for double Jeopardy. I think that's the right term.
There you go.
I hope I don't get dragged for my lack of Jeopardy knowledge.
Oh, you're good. I didn't even, I hadn't watched the show for a year and a half when they called me. The only reason I watched it before was for the initial audition to get on the show. I can't watch Jeopardy. It moves so quick. I told them, I'm like, this show's way too dizzying. I can't watch it. So I don't blame you at all. But hey, whatever. Go for it. Got to talk about migraine on it at least.
Amazing. So category is what it means to be a queer person navigating the medical system.
Yeah, I'm, in a lot of ways, I quote unquote pass. Doctors just look at me and go, oh, how's he going? Or, they'll assume my partner, if anything, or they'll assume gender, they'll assume gender of a partner, or they'll assume this. And, it's that, they're like million little cuts. And you just, in some ways kind of go, just give up. And for me, I navigate with a family where I don't really, care to educate them about things like pronouns and stuff. It's just, they're isolated and it's just not their world. They don't really interact with it. And I have so little spoons and energy. So I really kind of control who I think I can, educate and change. And things with doctors, you only try so many times and you go like, all right, just fine, misgender me, call me what you like. So that's one aspect of it. I mean, the other one is just the cost and the fear of life in general with, being queer and being disabled. Your employer can fire you for really any reason under our system. They don't have to say it's because you're queer or disabled. They can say, oh, because you came in a minute late that one day, or because you looked at me slightly weird, which for someone that can't look at screens and does tons of Zoom meetings, I mean, I guess I'll say this now, that's why I look away from the screen, because I can't really look at screens long at all. And so literally, an employer or a doctor could make up any reason for not wanting to see you again and not wanting to support you. And when so many treatments that we need aren't covered by insurance, I mean, right now I paid, I think, $6,000 out of pocket just to see one provider, which isn't their fault. They're not covered. They're, a great provider, but the treatments they provide that we need, insurance industry doesn't care about dizziness and doesn't want to treat it preventatively because it's so subjective in their mind. And it's, a lot of people, they view it as people complaining to get meds or what have you. So I think you add that with queer folks who generally disproportionately have more difficulty finding stable jobs, stable housing, stable healthcare. I'm, privileged in infinite ways, but I think it's especially true for fellow like queer and trans folks, especially folks of color, low-income folks, folks with disabilities. So I think just, navigating the relationships with the doctors, hopefully finding ones that are at least kind and patient, and then just finding advocates and organizations, hopefully that can help you, because that's a difficulty too, especially with our insurance gatekeepers to our care. And just, I try my best to share resources with folks so that we can hopefully find our ways around how the system, excludes us and doesn't want us to provide the care or to get the care that's needed. But it's definitely exhausting. That's a good word for it. They wear you out to the point where you're like, should I keep trying condition or treatments, or is this just going to be the rest of my life? That's a pretty horrible position to put someone in with a chronic disability, like to that the system basically pushes them to the point that they go, should I just give up forever and accept for the rest of my life I will see the world just through a chaos spinning, horribly pained, fatiguing, nauseating, just forever drunk on a boat that's spinning down a hill. And that's a really bad place to put humans in through a system that's supposed to provide, healthcare and treatment.
It's interesting about talking about gatekeepers. I was on my colleague's podcast, The Health Advocates, and I shared about my experience getting on migraine treatments and how I was on the phone with our insurance company for like the third or fourth time. And I finally said, after getting pushed around for over a month, what's the cheat code?
Yeah.
What do I need to
Yeah.
say? Because it kept getting pushed back based on a doctor not checking this box or this not, like, it was this bureaucratic nonsense. Like, it was no real reason, except they were delaying the treatment because it saves them money in the
Yep.
short term. So I asked what the cheat code is, and there was a really good episode on the Health Advocates around the cheat code for insurance companies, and basically asked them, like, what do you need me to do exactly? So yeah, that's really powerful how you describe that. We'll stop playing this game. We'll get back into the serious interview standard podcast. I read a little bit about you, Nicky, and there's a couple of areas that I thought were really interesting to explore. You are really connected to X-Men. What was it about X-Men and Marvel that drew you to that universe?
So two things I'll say before I forget. One, that cheat code you found, if you wrote that down or you remember any of it, if you would be down to put that, in my Twitter, Nicky Smith Bucks, Nicky NICKY, I have a doc, and this is just for everyone, I have a document link that anyone can add to, anyone can view, anyone can share. And I try to put any resources on there that I've heard about, that, I've tried, and then other folks have added. And I think having like that cheat code on there, for example, there's things like when you appeal something, you can say, hey, this treatment that I need here isn't close enough to me elsewhere. And that's like, for example, a coded language that insurance companies will go, well, I guess you can't drive 50 minutes away. Fine, we'll let you go to this practitioner closer to you. And there's like certain languages like that in the appeals that I just think, as you mentioned, or numbers you can press to skip the automated system. So we don't have to hear the music and then people talking over the music, which is, I think, a big migraine trigger is having to hear two things at once. And I love that hospitals don't realize that when you have to listen to we've won the best hospital program in the past 5 years, and they're doing it over super loud jazz music. And it's like, great, I have to listen to this for an hour to make sure I can complain to your insurance company that you're not covering me or what have you. So yeah, that'd be great to share that stuff. But yeah, in terms of the X-Men thing, I realized that a doctor, the first neurologist that I saw for vestibular migraine, sent me a resource list over the UC, like the University of California, San Francisco hospital messaging system. And no one told me I had access to that messaging system. I didn't know the messaging system existed. And then 6 years later, when I was looking for my medical records, they said, oh yeah, go to this system. I see the message. They sent every single thing that I wish I had tried right away. And I had to wait 6 years to see it because no one at the hospital mentioned, oh, we'll be sending you a message with what you should do post-treatment to actually help yourself. And so I went, screw this, which I wish I did earlier on. And I got every single book about migraine, vertigo, dizziness, the brain, neurology, anything I could find. And I read probably like 150 books in a summer. You can get them all free from your library. You can request them from other libraries through the loan program. And one of the books talked about how migraineurs are considered some of the original superheroes, because when a storm was coming or the rain was coming, the person with migraines in the group or in the tribe would stop and kneel and just grab their head and like, or point up at the sky. And then rain would come, a few hours later, and then people would know, oh, we have to stop and we have to set up camp because rain's coming, because our superhero let us know that the rain was coming. And so I like the idea that, migraineurs are considered the original superheroes, but also like, I get that the superhero movies are dominating everything and they're crappy in a lot of ways. But if you think of X-Men, all of them have different, disabilities, quote unquote, that are viewed, they're viewed as freaks. And I think X-Men, just their whole, they've always just been kind of like the freaks. There's a lot of community there. There's the school, there's the education of each other, the education of the young folks. And I think that's like the best thing, like the queer community and the chronically ill community and the disabled community can do is help young folks not feel isolated, is to help like educate and advocate with young folks, is to have our community be able to assert ourselves in the world and advocate for ourselves. You know, we're superheroes in that way, that we're able to survive this. Like if you were to give, I always say, if you give like my nausea or my fatigue or my body pain or my head pain or my dizziness, even my congestion, even my tinnitus, my phantom smells, my like, if you were to give any of my conditions to anyone else, they would fall on the floor, roll around, scream, cry, say, I'm gonna die, call 911, say, you need to come get me now. And just the fact that there's so many of us that live with that constantly for over a decade or years is like, I don't get, you know, I'm whatever. There's the young people and other folks that are more screwed by our system that need the platform that should be front and center. But I'm just saying there's so many of us that survive like this. And that's like, you know, the fact we can survive that is a beautiful thing. It just shows how powerful the brain is and how powerful our community is. Like infinite people have helped me in infinite little ways and have made life worth living with this, you know? So, and that's a lot of fellow queer folks, a lot of fellow disabled and chronically ill folks, you know?
Yeah, that's super interesting. I always felt connected to that story because as a gay person in a fairly conservative area, X-Men used their differences, and it was a strength, and it was something that they drew power on. And while they were marginalized by the community, they created their own, and they were celebrated, which was really, really empowering. And I think that, Nicky, you said it so well, talking about the connections between the chronic disease community and the LGBTQ community, and how we often build our own systems of support because we might not have it within our homes or within the medical system. We aren't heard, we aren't believed, we aren't empowered to, you know, take control of our lives. So I think that story with the X-Men is a really good one and really interested me. So I'm glad that you like that too. Do you have a favorite character?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Like Storm is just, the hair is so great. Just the fact that your condition gives you such cool hair. And if my hair wasn't pink, I have tons of, you know, the salt and pepper. I just hope someday I just get that natural like silver streak through. And, you know, Halle Berry is great. And I don't know who plays the new young Storm is great too. And, but also the dude that puts on, I think Evan Peters plays him, where it puts on the glasses and just runs around and like messes with the cops and the military. And I always forget that dude's name that can run really quickly. That's just how I like see the world, is I feel like, and how I move in the world. I feel like there's multiples of me every time I take a step that stay behind me, because I have, you know, such dizziness where the world is moving. It feels like I'm still moving behind me. And so I'm like the least cool version of that superhero. But I just love that. The idea of being able to, you know, move at the speed of light, all those things when, you know, I'm moving at the light scares me. So yeah. But those, what about you?
Storm is my favorite too.
There you go. Storm's
and
the
you're
best.
talking, Storm is amazing. And who doesn't want to control the weather? I mean, like,
I know, for us too. Yeah.
it's like, Storm, no, go away. And I think you were talking about Quicksilver,
Quicksilver, what a name.
Magneto's son.
Yeah, what a great name.
Amazing. I love, you're the second person that I've had on Talking Head Pain that we've talked Marvel, so I might, you know, do a spin-off one day. I want to just last couple of minutes that I have with you, wanted to turn back to Jeopardy. And I read that you've received a lot of messages from fellow migraine patients after seeing you on Jeopardy. What were some of those messages, and how did it make you feel? And has it given you a different purpose or outlook during your migraine journey?
I used to be really big into organizing and advocacy. And then my chronic, you know, vertigo and vestibular migraines hit me, and it was just impossible to keep organizing. You know, I was bedridden for months. I can't really do, you know, like protests and marches really anymore. I used to speak in front of thousands of people. That sounds pretty horrible now. I used to do tons of screen work, emailing thousands of people and coordinating meetings and just doing endless this kind of stuff. And I just can't really anymore. But I've tried as best as I can to, share resources and do things with folks, who've had brain injuries. I've had a concussion, who have these conditions. I only know of a couple people that have had vestibular migraine, 24/7 for over a decade. And it's just, but I hear, cases about like, especially kids with this. And it's hard to tell a kid, hey, get out of bed. This is your new normal. But there are kids that I know that, I've heard of that are they just can't go to school. They're just bedridden with this condition because, how are they going to want to go to school if they're just constantly dizzy? How do they think they'd be able to go to school? And just parents feeling super isolated and alone with this, and young people in general feeling isolated and alone with this and scared. And so I know when I went on Jeopardy, I think initially they were like, oh, you could talk about how you walk your cat and things like that. And I just I knew the best thing that could come out of it is just being able to say the words migraine and dizziness and, chronic dizziness on TV. And no exaggeration, I've probably gotten like 500, 600 messages. It's only been a couple weeks at this point. It feels like it's been so much longer in every way from people throughout the world. And the number one thing is I've never heard anyone else with this condition talk about it. I feel so isolated and alone with it. I can't go to the grocery store. I can't do this. I can't do that. It feels so isolating. And just be able to connect people with resources. People connected me with resources. Like I'm seeing a physical therapist now that's helped someone with their episodic dizziness. And the physical therapist is seeing me on a sliding scale. And, because my case is unique, which is, a gatekeeper thing, like, hey, my case is so unique. Will you see me for less maybe, but just like seeing all those messages, being able to connect people, being able to I think it energizes you. And I think, a lot of people talk about the fear of being an advocate and the fear of reaching out and being public with stuff. And I think I'm in a privileged position, a lucky position to be able to do that. But I think a big thing for a lot of us is how fatigued we are and how debilitating our condition is. And I'm shocked by, the messages I've gotten and the support I've gotten. I think that enlivens you and energizes you to want to keep doing this work and reaching out to people, which then makes it a stronger community, so that when you do have an attack or when you aren't able to fully be there, other people can step up because they know what you're going through. Like from Jeopardy, I would say the greatest experience, one of the greatest experiences in the entire history of my life, is I finally met another human face to face with vestibular migraine. And it's because they saw the article someone wrote about me on Jeopardy, and they're like, oh my God, I live 10 blocks from you. And there's someone else with episodic vestibular migraine that lives 5 blocks from me. And I thought that was maybe there was someone in Palo Alto I heard about, that has this, but able to look. I mean, I look away from people's eyes all the time because I'm so dizzy, but for a half a second, being able to look in the eyes of someone that knows what you're going to, face to face, that knows what it's like to have constant dizziness for years, is really, really just, affirming and moving and supportive, and just to know that exists. And we're out there.
I think it's a good lesson that we can make an impact. We can be on Jeopardy, make an impact, or we could be on our school board, or we could be at the grocery store. It doesn't really matter where we are. We could find ways to make change. And I think that your story, Nicky, really highlights that. I would be remiss, or I need to ask, is there any juicy tea about being on Jeopardy that we don't see? Any behind the scenes drama that we should know about? Anything fun?
Yeah, the first little thing I'll say is I really appreciate what you do and your organization. In terms of Jeopardy, the funny thing about award shows is there was all that controversy in, I think it was the 50s and 60s, with how rigged they were. And so then they heavily monitor them now and surveil them. And there's kind of like Ernst & Young wandering around and making sure everything's legit. And you're always mic'd all the time. And you go to the bathroom, people are kind of there. Everything's just really monitored. And I always forgot that I was mic'd. And so I'm up there on stage. I forget I'm mic'd, and I'm like, oh, I wish LeVar Burton was our host, or I keep saying things kind of shitting on the show a little bit, being like, oh, I don't know why they didn't pick LeVar Burton or something like that. And people kept having to come up to me like, you're mic'd. And it's like, oh yeah, or, you go to the bathroom and forget, it's like, oh, you're mic'd. You're like always mic'd. So that's, pretty funny in my view to this. I mean, the stuff we were talking about too, the other genderqueer person and I on stage, we were talking about just really like kind of radical anti-capitalist history. And then they do this kind of overheard on Jeopardy YouTube segments. And they're like, what are you talking about? And we're like, we're talking about abolishing the prison industrial complex. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're looking for more lighthearted contestant chat for our YouTube channel, basically. So, it's pretty funny. I always say you put me in any situation, I'm inevitably talk about destroying the system that created it or something. So I don't know. It was definitely very, very bizarre and funny. Another funny thing is that you come up on set in Sony Studios and you see these huge posters for what Sony Studios is promoting. And they have The Good Doctor. And I'm on the spectrum and I looked at that and I was like, that show. But then of course they asked a question about The Good Doctor on Jeopardy. And you're supposed to like know that stuff. You're supposed to know Sony Studios is going to ask questions that they promote like at the time your episode's coming out. So whatever. So that's, just dorky stuff like that. I mean, you do your makeup and hair at the Wheel of Fortune studio, which is super small. And then you go to Jeopardy. So that's kind of funny. They tape 5 episodes in a day. So you have to bring multiple pairs of clothes. So it's the illusion that it's a new day, but really it's just go, hair again, put on a different shirt and run out if you win. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of like illusions and, they do a lot of cuts and things. People mess up. It's definitely pretty funny. Yeah.
I love the hot mic Nicky.
Oh my gosh.
Shade at the host.
I know. And the nice thing about Ken is he, whatever. They're like, hey, Ken, if you listen to this and you want to reach out and you want to donate, go for it. But like a lot of the people on the show and stuff, I mean, when you mention that you have dizziness or migraines, everybody knows someone with migraines. Most people know someone with dizziness. It's the number 2 reason people go to the ER and urgent care. Like, and then they just go, oh, you have this, and you connect with them and you connect with everyone with it. And so I think that's something to learn from anything, as you mentioned, like people on your school board, people at your work, people, everyone knows, odds are knows someone with migraine, knows someone with dizziness, or has those symptoms. And if you talk about the symptoms, they go, huh. And for example, these prism glasses are like a godsend. And the person I met with vestibular migraines, she's had it for years. She's never even heard of prisms. And these have been, and it's just stuff like that. Like, I constantly talk about my prisms. If they're, for people with brain injury, like I've had people with learning disabilities, with migraine, with, dizziness, what have you. There's so many resources out there that we don't know about that can help us. And just, yeah, I hate to say don't give up, but like literally there's so much stuff out there. And the system tries to make us give up, as we talked about before, but there's endless stuff coming out that you're promoting or that you're, making folks aware of and stuff. So yeah, thanks for what you do.
Well, thank you for joining us today. This was fun, Nicky. We, we started with animal sacrifice and we ended with building a better community together. So I think we really gone the gamut, and it's been an amazing discussion. Thank you for listening to this episode of Talking Head Pain, the podcast that confronts head pain head on. If you like this episode, please leave an honest 5-star rating and subscribe so you never miss another. I'm Joe Coe, and I'll see you next time.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation Podcast Network.